Well, welcome back to another episode here on the Enneagram at Work podcast. I am your host, Sarah Wallace, and we have our other co host, Demetrius, aka D. Parker, back to talk about another grouping on the Enneagram. So, if you are a first time listener, welcome. I hope to be saying welcome back to you at some point. If you are a returning listener, you might have heard an episode that we did in the past where we talked about our high energy types, the type 3, the 7, and the type 8. Not to say that no other type can have high energy, but those just tend to have a reputation. So today we're going to be talking about another grouping. And Dee, would you let us know which grouping, what types we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about our duty, care, and loyalty types. So the 1, 2, and 6.
Okay, all right. And you know, I will say we'll get into it more. We talked about how the 3, 7, 8s are sometimes known as the assertive, sometimes the aggressive. And I will say sometimes I see ones having a little pull in that direction as well. They are in this grouping, but sometimes they're like an honorary uh high energy type for some different reasons that we'll probably talk a little bit about today. But I think one of the things that stands out for these types, and please share or correct me if you disagree, is that they tend to be a little bit more kind of group focused. So, where the 3, the 7, and the 8, they can also be very team oriented. They like people. But sometimes it's like, hey, what's best for me, or what's going to feel fun, or how am I going to be successful? And of course, the types today can also have that, but a lot of times they're leading with, okay, putting my needs aside, kind of what's best for the group. And I think sometimes that's where they get that loyal, dutiful name when we talk about these three.
Oh yeah, no, I would definitely agree. I'm just thinking about some of my um some folks that I've worked with in the past that are in that one strategy space, and definitely coming in to say, hey, did we bring everyone to this? Like, where I know you say you want to go this way. Have we gotten buy-in from everyone else? What does that look like? So for sure, I would definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, yeah. So they make really great teammates for, I think, for that reason, because it is very much like, hey, what's best for the group, and they can make wonderful leaders for that reason too. So we're going to talk a little bit about how they work well together, maybe where there might be some potential friction, and then like we did in the last episode with our 3, 7, 8s, also look at what are like this energy as a group and how they work with a few of the other types. But before we do, let's just quickly kind of lay the foundation, some core characteristics of each of the types. Do you want to kick it off with type 1?
Sure. Yeah, I'll kick over one. So one's strengths that I love about one's integrity, high standards, accountability, are there, and I'll say to the forefront when you think about that one strategy. I would say the growth edge for them is that they can become rigid, a little overly critical, and sometimes perfectionistic. Um, and I like to call their leadership superpower is they set the bar for excellence and ethical decision making. Each time that I work with ones, I remember even one time one of my ones said, "D, maybe I should set my bar lower because because I don't feel like people are meeting." And I was like, "Nope, don't set your bar lower.
Oh,
Just understand that, you have really high expectations for yourself, and not everyone's going to get there, but setting that bar at least gives them a space to grow more, right? So anyway, that's what I would share about the one.
yeah. And I think they also have, I think something that the rest of us should remember is that they can come across as critical. They can be experienced as rigid, but they have a very harsh inner critic. Again, we all have a little inner critic on in us. I think for the ones, it's really loud. So and it can be kind of mean. And so when you think of a one being really rigid and critical to you, like, yes, there's some things that they can do, but also just keeping in mind it's probably like 10 times as worse what they're saying to themselves in their own head. So that
I
sometimes
call it the drill sergeant,
the you call it the what?
the drill sergeant,
The drill
right? They have,
sergeant. Oh yeah,
yeah,
yes.
right? They have
Yes.
a, you know, you should have done this, Private. I don't
Yes.
understand why you did this. Seriously.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That I think ones will probably be nodding along with you. And just out of curiosity, because with this one, I see a lot of people starting their typing journey. And I don't want to get into like a typing segment, but this one is very common where people will be stuck between a one or a three. What is something that you have noticed that really kind of defines the one energy versus a three? Is there anything that you would say to
So,
that?
so yeah, so as someone who has that three strategy, I will say what I feel differentiates is ones tend to use a lot of absolutes. So
Okay.
if you find yourself saying should a lot, you should do this, right? They should have done this. If you find yourself shooting yourself a lot, um, more than likely you're in that one space.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. Coming from a three, D would have some uh insight on that. Okay, so the next one in this is our type two, striving to feel connected, sometimes known as the helper, the caregiver. And this one is always interesting because they're in this category right there with the one, but it's sometimes it seems like they're almost opposite because a one can be so task oriented and our twos can be incredibly people focused. And so rather than like a checklist, a to-do list, it's more like how is this going to impact, how is this to-do list going to impact the people? And so they really are wonderful about having empathy, wanting to understand people, tend to be very generous, very focused on, rapport building, relationship building, which is a wonderful skill to have in the workplace. But, when those are overused, of course, you can kind of slip into over doing it, over trying to connect, which can lead to people pleasing, dependency on others, the approval, needing someone else's approval. But like all types with their own skills, they can also make really excellent, powerful leaders in their own way, because they can build teams where people feel like they belong. People are motivated because they feel like somebody cares. And I really do. Sometimes we'll talk about our type twos are the people that are like, hey, how are you doing? And what do we normally say? Fine, good. And if something's off, a
Oh
two
no.
will say, "Yeah, what's really going on?" So they really see you and they're really going to take the time to slow it down and dig into like what's really going on. Anything you would add to that? Any specific
Yeah.
examples, stories? Yes, please do.
Well, a couple things. Yeah. One is you talked about list. And it all made me think. So twos also have a list versus ones is a task list. Twos
Mm-hmm.
twos have a list of what you've done and what you haven't done. Like
Oh, great one.
they can
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, like they can track. They know, hey, here's what you have done and here's what you haven't done. And especially in comparison to what they have. And so, keep that in mind. Especially if you're trying to your point, not trying to make this a typing segment, but if you're thinking about, am I in that too? If you know that you keep those kind of list of that, you could be leaning in that two space. The other thing that I would add with tools is, yes, they want to please and they want to be there for people. And at the same time, in a not so great way, right? A maladaptive way, they have to be careful with that because it can become what I call the mafia, which is you owe me. Um,
Oh, Oh, I haven't heard that, but I like
Oh
it.
yeah, no, I
Yeah.
talk about it all the time. It's that whole, if you remember the scene in The Godfather where it's like, hey, I'm gonna do you this favor. Um, and he got the guy out of debt and made sure that the person didn't bother him anymore. And then he came back later in the movie and said, hey, I want you to kill this person for me. And they were like, whoa, 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 is that the same? He's like, no, no, you owe me.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I did it for you. Now you need to do this for me. And I won't say it's conscious that they do that, but it is something that can come up with twos. And, one of the things that I love about twos is that they know what you need before you even know what you need.
Yeah.
And I love that about them. That I will say the maladaptive side to that, though, can be that sometimes sometimes we're not ready for what we need, right? So you think
Mm.
about Christmas time, right? We want a particular thing and we say we want that thing, and then our parents give us what we need. So if you ever think about if you ever got a sweater for Christmas when you actually really wanted, a specific toy, I don't know, just think
I
about a
got an
toy,
electric blanket one year and
right?
that
Exactly,
wasn't
right?
what I wanted.
It's not what I want. But guess what? when
Oh,
you when you got cold and you plugged in an electric blanket and
uh-huh.
turned
Uh-huh.
it on, you're like, this is the best thing
It's nice.
ever, right? Because they knew what you needed, it just wasn't what you wanted. And so,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I when I'm coaching twos that I talk about, being careful of because sometimes they start to force that thing that they know you need, but you're not ready for it. And so understanding that and being able to deliver what that is in a way that you can accept it. So that's what comes to mind when I think about tools.
And I think that's a great reminder for the twos. Just to know, people aren't ready. Sometimes it is the unsolicited advice, and yeah, you gotta wait. The mafia thing, I'm gonna steal that.
Hey,
The version that we'll sometimes talk about is giving with hooks, um, but kind of same concept. So just something to be aware of in your relationship with a two and as a two, some self-awareness there. Okay, so the next one in this grouping is our type six. Do you want to do the overview on that one?
yeah, those, my loyalty folks, right? Loyalty, foresight, commitment to the team when you're thinking about from a team perspective and that safety part of the team. You know, that being said, when you start thinking about safety, you also thinking about folks becoming anxious. And so they can have that anxious part. They can be very doubtful, overly cautious, so they're not typically not big risk takers. Um, and so from a team perspective, when folks are working with them, they can kind of be like, oh, you're a Debbie Downer, you're bringing me down. Like, let's get away from that. But at the same time, they bring reliability. Like they're so reliable. Um, yes, and they have, to reframe that lack of risk is risk awareness. Like they bring
Yes.
that risk awareness
Risk
to
management,
decisions.
maybe.
Risk
Yes.
management. Yeah, risk management, right? And so they're looking at it going, okay, hold on, this sounds great. And especially when I think about us in that 3, 7, 8 space where we're just like, let's make it
Yeah.
happen. They're like, whoa, 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 slow that down.
Yeah.
Um, I want to make it happen. However, let's look at what does that mean, right? What is it
Yeah.
going to cost us? And so it's good to, again, one of the things I want to put out there is as we talk about all these different strategies, there's not one that's like the strategy, the best. Each one of them have their pros and cons. And so keeping that in mind um, is very important. So I just want to make sure we put that out there. But yeah, I mean, those are the things that when I think about six, that I think about are some of those key traits to think about. From your perspective, what's something that you would add to that?
You know, speaking of kind of inner what we have, sometimes you'll hear the six they'll say like they have an inner committee, and it's not necessarily negative, but it's just like a lot of voices. And so it's like we could do this or we could do this. And so you struggle with sometimes paralysis analysis, much like a one can sometimes struggle with paralysis analysis, but it's because it's not perfect enough versus there's so many things that we could do. So there's that, but one that sixes seem to relate to the most is the idea of an inner BS meter.
Mm.
And when we talk about group cohesion, they're almost like the group police in that, oh, we got a new person joining the team. Wait, we had a good thing going on right here. Like, how is this person going to impact our dynamic? Or, oh, we're getting a new CEO. I don't know. Because they tend to have I'll trust you once you give me a reason to trust you versus
Yeah,
someone like a seven who might say, oh, I'll trust you till you give me a
I
reason not
trust you.
to. Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and so they can be really, they tend to be really like on high alert with what is this person saying versus like what are they really saying with their body language or like what is their intention. And so that BS meter, like can I trust this person or not, is very sensitive. Somebody we had talked about that during a workshop, and then at the end I said, you guys, this was so great. I really enjoyed you. You've been one of my favorite groups. And the six said, I think you say that to everybody. And I was like, well, I think I do, but it's like each one is kind of my new favorite. So, but it's that kind of like BS, BS. And I mean, that's so needed, at times. So I appreciate that.
At
Yeah.
times, yes, yes,
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
So the I think they care so deeply about the group, and it can come off as negative, but it is because, hey, I'm bringing this skepticism because I don't know how this new policy or this new person or this new leader of our organization, how are they going to impact me, and how are they going to impact our group?
yeah. I mean, on to your point, I think I like working with sixes, and for that is because at times I know that I can go off the rails with bringing in not only new people, but new ideas
Yeah.
and just take risk. Because I want to get things done. And I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm bringing this person in because they can help us get it done. And so having sometimes even trying to step into that mindset,
Mm-hmm.
say I'm going to slow down, I'm going to be more intentional. Um, I think it's really important. And one of the things I feel that's helped me of being in that triad of the 3, 6, and 9 is sometimes going to that 6 from a loyalty standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's has worked in my favor.
Yeah.
Um, because if I had just stayed in that 3 strategy, I can easily just bulldoze through things because I just want to get stuff done.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I find a value in that.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on six, and I just because sometimes they get a bad reputation for just being like anxious, worry warts.
Mm,
But I can see the argument to be made that they maybe are one of the bravest types because to think about how much courage it takes to raise your hand and ask a question like, have we thought about this in a room when everybody's really excited about the new idea or the new position that they're going to hire for, and
mm.
they're like, is nobody going to ask the question? You're going to make me ask the question. Am I going to have to? Okay, I guess I have to ask the question. And so it's like, okay, let me raise my hand and I'll be the negative one here. And that does, that's kind of taken one for the team. And although maybe the team doesn't see it that way at the moment, I do think there is a lot of bravery and courage that our sixes exude on a regular basis because they are thinking this way and asking these sort of tough questions potentially.
Yeah, no, I would agree. It's good. As facilitators, a lot of times we say, and I know it sounds cliche to a lot, but we'll make that statement is there's no dumb questions.
Yeah.
Uh, and a lot of times the fact that they will, to your point, they be like, well, I agree with you, there's no dumb question, but I have a question, and they ask it, and it helps everyone.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it does. It's like, oh gosh, I'm so glad you thought of that. So, well, we need those sixes. We need them all. We need those sixes. So just to kind of pull this group together, what so we said that these types are really focused on kind of the group, putting their needs aside for the sake of the group.
Yeah.
Any other common similarities that these types tend to have that you would want to say, you would want to mention?
Um, responsibility. Um, these three types to me seem to always be responsible. Whether it's thinking about principles, whether it's thinking about the people, whether it's thinking about the group security, like they step into a space with a responsibility um to make sure that those areas are being taken care of and not overlooked. And so that's something that I see from all three of them. It's and I think they almost take that on, like they have a
Hmm.
responsibility to do those things.
Yeah.
Like I said, each in its own space. You know, one's again more around principles, two more around the people. Six is the security. Do we feel secure? And not in a selfish way when I think about that security, but it's hey, do we have the things that we really need?
Hmm.
Um, so those are the kind of things that I see a lot of in that sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It is just like, yeah, that sense of responsibility, I think is, you said that really well. Like it's my duty,
It's
hence
my
like
duty.
kind of the dutiful, yeah, it's my duty to make sure everybody's okay, and in different ways about doing that. Okay, so they have that kind of, undercurrent of similarities. However, there's also many differences between these three. What do you see as a key difference between a type 1 and a type 2? And I know we talked about the task list versus the what have you done for me lately task list. Anything else you would add to that?
Um, Interesting. So I would say probably for me, in my experience with these two, is the intensity that
Hmm.
two. So um ones to me a lot of times comes across a lot more intense, a lot, a lot more serious. Versus two can be very friendly, very light in the beginning. Um, they can get to that intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but when I think about ones and twos, those are the two things that probably stand out most for me is that um, even when ones, when I feel, even when they're light, there's this intensity that's just like, it's almost like I'm doing this because it's what I'm supposed to do
Uh-huh.
versus this is where I am. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that's the difference that I feel just from an energy standpoint when I'm around those two. And I share that, and I'm probably gonna get myself in trouble because I will say there's two people near and dear to me that come to mind. So my mother-in-law is a one and my wife
Okay.
is a two. Um, so I'm around those two energies a lot. A lot.
Yeah, so you got some firsthand expertise experience.
Firsthand experience.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that is I think a similarity that stands out is that I will put my own needs to the side for the sake of what someone else needs or the group needs. But again, it's just kind of thought about and delivered maybe in a little bit different way. I think that I think that's a good one. I Something else that I will hear from twos, and I think we've talked about this before. I've definitely talked about it on the podcast before, is the two does have a reputation for being like warm and friendly and bring the group together, be a nurturer. But to your point, if the scale on their list starts to tip, they're going to get upset about it. That mob boss or two might come out, and they have that highway to an eight. And
Yes.
they can get really angry, emotionally, like volatile because either because they care deeply. And so it's upsetting that this decision didn't take into account the people or a particular person, or you're not listening to their advice. It's like, hey, listen, we didn't ask for your advice, but listen, I have advice, and they can get really upset. And on the receiving end, there have been a couple of really interesting conversations around how emotionally overwhelming that can be for someone like a one, like a five, maybe even like a nine. That emotional intensity. I think
Mm.
ones have like a hard work ethic intensity when we talk about intensity, and twos have, I think it's more emotional. That it can
Oh,
feel overwhelming.
oh yeah, no, no. Yeah, I honestly have this conversation a lot.
Okay. Well, we
I,
want to be careful.
yes, yes. Well, again, I share with my wife I will be doing these podcasts, and so, she does it. So my wife's a therapist and a
Which
two.
helps. Yeah.
Surprising, huh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so with that though, yeah, no, it is that piece that sometimes where, to your point, it's that advice. You're like, is it really advice, or were you just telling me to do something?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a difference. If I give you advice, for me, when I give someone advice, there's no expectation that you're going to take my advice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sharing it because I'm not saying this is what you need. I'm saying this is a way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when twos come with that, because they feel, and there's feelings tied to it,
Yeah.
it's when I give you this is the best thing for you. And so when you don't take it, and especially if you come back later and you say, hey, here's where I am, and they're looking at you like, so you didn't take my advice, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so again, that's where that mafia thing is like, I gave it to you, right? I gave it to you and you didn't do it,
Yeah.
So that's where I feel that can come in. Um, and at the same time, just keeping in mind that when they're doing it from the heart. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why it's so intense. And that's probably why also it feels so heavy. And especially for those of us who don't necessarily like to be in touch with our emotions as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again. But I find that so many people are gravitated towards them.
Uh-huh.
Um, I will look and yeah, my wife can just be like we're checking like the Metro or RTD train and just sitting there, and someone will come in and be like, oh, and just start unloading their day, like, oh, no, no, no. And you're like, do we know this person?
Yeah.
Right? And it's almost like they know, like, hey, um, so there's that piece of being there that they give peace. And at the same time, when they when they are intentional about giving that piece and someone doesn't necessarily asks for it, it can feel heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of reminds me, we'll move on after this, but that kind of reminds me of another interesting aha that came up during a workshop in the past where there was a type two, and was sharing. I'd be curious if you're whatever you're willing to share on this, if there's something that resonates as well. But she was saying, like, when we have a problem, like, we need to talk about it right now. If you're mad at me, we need to talk it out right now. This moment, I can't go to bed mad. I can't leave this meeting mad. I can't leave you mad. And her couple of her teammates were saying, sometimes I don't know how I feel about it. And so I don't even know how we would resolve it, or I just need to process it. And she said, and I understand that, but it feels like we're never going to be okay when that happens. And so they had kind of worked out an agreement that the person who kind of felt overwhelmed during a conflict, they were going to say, hey, can you give me an hour? Or can you give me a day? So the two wasn't like, when will we get this resolved? And the two had to be okay with like, hey, we're not okay in this exact moment, but I feel confident that we will be okay when we talk
Exactly. No,
again.
honestly, spot on. And if you are that person that says, "Hey, I can't talk about this right now, and here's the time that I need," make sure you come back.
Make sure you come back. Yeah.
You come back because remember, I told you they have the list, right?
Uh-huh.
It is
Uh-huh.
a mental list, and they say, "You told me you're going to come back in an hour. You told me you're going to come back in a day," and they
Yeah.
won't say anything. They won't say anything. They will move, but you will feel it. You will
Yeah.
feel it, and it'll be like,
Uh-huh.
and you're like, "What's going on?" And you're like,
Oh,
"It's been 2 days. You
it's
told me
this.
a day. It's been 2 days. I'm not good, right?
Yeah. We're
I'm
not
not.
okay. I'm not
We're
okay, so
not
we're not
okay.
okay.
Exactly. I'm not okay, so we're not okay.
Yeah.
Uh, so you got to come back to it. But yeah, we and with that, we probably should move on to what do you think about six?
Six. Okay. So I know we had talked about the inner committee. We could do this or
Yes.
we could do this. And I think ones also might have a little bit of that, but I think because they do have such a strong like moral value compass, typically it's easier to be like this is the right thing to do, this is what we need to do. And so there sometimes could be I could see there being some friction between like, oh, this inner commit, all these different things that we could do as a six, or this or this, and a one might say it's so clear, this is the right thing to do, and a six might say, well, let's look into it, or what, do we have the research behind it? So there's that. And then I know I wouldn't say twos are to the level of a stereotypical seven on the rose colored glasses, like let's throw glitter and run through rainbows sometimes that I think stereotypical sevens feel. But they are more optimistic, believing like we'll work through it. Maybe a little like we have already kind of talked about. Sometimes they're a little bit more warm, sometimes they're a little bit more friendly. Of course, sixes can also be warm and friendly, but I think sometimes twos can be a little perturbed by the constant, what seems like as negativity, skepticism of others, skepticism of just everything. And so I could see there being some friction there with that more kind of positive, because I think twos probably are also more of a trust someone until they give me a reason not to trust them. So that optimism, more on that side. Um, what else? Anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with those. Um, and it's hard with all these, and I also wanted to throw this out there. With all these, remember we're talking a generalization, right? Um, there's so many other things that come into play when you're talking about people. So your environment, your culture, your background, all those things. So I just, as you were just talking about some of these things, and I'm thinking about certain people that use these strategies in life. There's also all those other layers that are in play. Um,
Absolutely.
so I just wanted to point that out. And yeah, I would agree. I mean, when I think about the six when they're in that skeptic space, and how they can frustrate, even though they're all in that sharing that common space, at the same time, it's I would say it's probably not the what, it's the how. And you probably heard me say
Mm,
that before, right? But it's not that they are being skeptical, it's how they're being skeptical about it
mm-hmm.
that can then probably drive the one or the two crazy, along with honestly other other
Yeah.
strategies as
Yeah.
well. But when we're talking about these three in particular, um, I feel that's where that can come into play because you know ones can have that again, that certainty. This is the, I call it the Mandalorian. This is the way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and twos can be a bit more optimistic, especially when you think about these three. I love what you said. Twos not being optimistic like the sevens, or even the way that threes can phrase things to be
Mm-hmm.
optimistic.
Spin it. Mm-hmm.
Um, how we, yeah, threes, we're great spinners. Um, Maybe we should be DJs.
Yeah.
Uh,
You got your inner PR agency inside of you that is
but
rocking
when
and
you think
rolling.
about these three, they're definitely twos tend to be a bit more optimistic. And so
Mm-hmm.
when hit with that skepticism in the way that it comes out, that's where that frustration can layer in and kind of become a problem for them to work through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, I don't want to go through all of them, but is there a particular type that is not on the list today that you can see? Like maybe we could just go through, like, is there a recent example or the most common friction with like a one and another type outside of this grouping today? Um, that comes
Mm,
up for you, and we can do like a two and a six, just because this is one of the most common questions. It's like, how do these two interact, how do these two interact? So we'll give everybody just a couple more. One that came up recently, and it's come up before but it's just fresh on my mind, that I'll share with the one, is that they had expressed that it could be frustrating to understand a nine potentially, because they are so comfortable with like, oh, we could do it this way, or we could do it this way, or I can see where that person's coming from, or I can see where that person's coming from. And they were kind of saying, like, I mean, it's so clear what the right thing to do is. It's so clear what is right and wrong. Like, it bothers me that they don't have that like hard line in the sand. So I could see that being a frustration, but also, I think we're going to talk about growth here in just a second. I think there's a lot of things that the one can kind of pull in and lean into with some of that nine energy, um being a little bit more,
yeah,
inclusive, open-minded.
yeah, no, as you put that question out, I started thinking, and um, I'm going to go with two, and I would say twos probably struggle a bit with honestly, 3, 7, 8.
Yeah.
Uh,
Say more.
that's like, well, because the high energy type, because of that high energy, I don't feel we slow down enough for two to feel heard and valued.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because and again, it's not because we're discounting them, um, but it's that we're moving so quickly, and we are so quick to share our thoughts, our ideas, and then put them into action, that when the two is coming with sharing from their perspective what they feel is needed, and then we're not slowing down enough for them to take that in. I feel that's where they can have some frustration. So I know you said one other type, but I'm gonna give you three.
I can see that. Yeah. Well, because and my next one for the six was going to be something similar, and it was going to be, from what I hear from many sixes, is they're the sevens and the threes majority of the time, and it's around the like sevens truly believe everything's going to work out, love that about them, but we also need to like infuse a dose of reality into this, and it can be really frustrating. And then the three will be like, well, I can't, I don't feel safe because what they're telling me, they've spun into this story, so how do I trust it? And sometimes they'll have some friction with the eight, but I think out of those three, what I hear is that they appreciate the directness of the eight, because it's like, yeah, it might hurt my feelings sometimes, or I may not agree, but we know where each other stands because we're willing to they're willing to give it to me straight. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I would agree to that. And so really quickly, I've thought about, we've shared our numbers quite a bit on the frustrating side of things for these
Yes.
for these styles and types. So uh before we get into transformation, growth, all that thing, I want to apologize. Honestly, I want to, and as I'm thinking about it, I want to, if I frustrated you, if you're in one of these styles and you work with me, or you're friends with me, or you're married with me, I sincerely want to apologize, take this moment to publicly apologize, because it was not and is not intentional. I know I can when I'm in my groove, I'm in my groove. And so it is never, and I think everyone should understand this. I don't think anyone's ever waking up in the morning thinking, how can I frustrate somebody? Right? How can I frustrate this type? I don't think anyone is doing that. And at the same time, it's good that when we are aware of a disservice to someone, intentional and or not, to take that time to apologize. So publicly, I want to apologize and say, I'm sorry if I frustrated you or you felt, or I made you feel, not that you felt, that I made you feel discounted or disvalued. Never
Well,
the
I
intent.
think I think that's okay. That's I think good to acknowledge. And a lot of times, people aren't thinking about the Enneagram necessarily when everything is going really well. And so it is when you're feeling frustrated or annoyed or there is some sort of conflict where you're trying to figure out like what the heck. And so this is more like we're diving in. Like when you feel frustrated, this is what might be going on underneath the surface. So I know sometimes people feel like they're getting picked on, but we are equal opportunity. We'll pick on all the time.
We're gonna take on everybody. Everybody.
Oh,
Um,
we'll do everybody. Yeah, because everybody
and
has
with
their
that,
stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I know
Mm.
I'm just I know again, as I pick on us, I'm gonna pick on us now.
Yeah.
Um, our energies that we love to talk about because there's so much to talk about. But then we end up with these episodes that are forever. Uh, so I'm actually trying to tap in right now, to be more reserved. And so let's try to get us on track and let's talk about some of the things that can help with these strategies that could possibly help them, uh, in the spaces that they're in. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start with one.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
so I feel ones, if they can relax a bit more, right? And I think some folks say, tap into that seven
Hmm.
and enjoy life and kind of transform from the rules and transfer those rules into frameworks that empower, um diverse strategies, understanding again, getting away from that Mandalorian mindset of this is the way. And when I'm coaching with ones, I say try to get away from the model of this is the way versus this is a way.
That's great.
And being able to be more adaptable,
Hmm.
uh, and having some, I guess, blended discipline. I feel that would help with ones.
I really like the way versus a way. And then I know for our twos, um, there's probably some work around the word no, setting boundaries, kind of that clearest kind. And especially when you think about, working with your type 6 teammate or your type 8 teammate, it can feel weird to be so direct, if that doesn't come natural to you necessarily, or worrying about, disrupting that connection, hurting somebody's feelings. And so you're going to soften it up a bit, but just remembering that, it's like, let's just, yeah, let's just, deliver it, be clear as you can, because there is a lot to that saying, clear as kind. And then saying no, I don't, everybody wants to be a team player. These types are kind of the ultimate team players in a lot of ways. And sometimes being a good team player is first taking care of yourself. So you're not showing up tired, grumpy, hangry, and you can be a better teammate because you have taken care of yourself. So those are some tips I'm sure that they probably heard if there are two, but just friendly reminders. What you
Yeah,
got
no,
for the
and
six? Oh, go
well,
ahead.
I actually want to add it really something too is also um because I feel at times I feel there's some twos that they can say no. So it's not, and I want to go back to the what versus the how. There's some twos that they've learned how to say no, but because it's still uncomfortable, how they say no,
Mm,
the impact from that, right? Or even advocating for self because they're not so comfortable advocating with self that when they do, it feels more like a demand versus
oh,
if that makes sense. And so just
yeah.
kind of understanding that piece of again, not the what, but the how.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good one.
but yeah,
That's a good
so
point.
that's what I would just add on to that with for the two. For six, um, I the first thing that comes to mind is that fear space, and if they can learn to transform that fear into trust, and understanding, and it's like yeah, you can have doubt, but then how do you come together and co-create?
Yeah.
Um, versus again, and when I use names, please know I'm not directing, but when I say negative Nancy, right, or Debbie Downer, right, I'm not saying all Debbies are downers or all Nancy's are negative. They're just terms, but if you can kind of transform that space and again, using that same theory of it's not the what, but the how do I bring this into a space I want to share that I have some concerns, but I want to do it in a very high performing collaborative way, so that folks still want to collaborate with you and see that you can be an innovator, um, and that you can take risk as long as you know the consequences of that, what those risks are going to entail.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would share with six.
Yeah, that I think that's really great. Because um yeah, it's easy to kind of overthink. It's easy to make it seem negative, but you're right. Kind of that delivery, thinking about how to. I love what you said. Well, how did you say it? High performing, collaborative. Um,
Yes.
I think it's really well said. Um, all right. Well, with that, I think any closing words. I know we said. We're not picking on anybody, but it's known as I know Mario from Awareness to Action will call it a problem resolution system. And so if everything's in your life is going great, well then, by no means like disrupt that. But when there's friction or you're having issues or whatever, this hopefully will give you some things to think about, to get curious about. By no means are we um, predicting the future or, saying every two is this way or everyone is this way, but it'll give you some things to think about so that you can go to that person and, get curious, ask questions, better understand where they're coming from. And it might be different from what we talked about today, but at least you'll have kind of a foundation. Any final words from you, Dee, as we
Yeah.
close this one
Yeah.
out?
My last thing, and I love what you brought up, which is the word curious. Stay curious, and not only curious about others, curious about self. This is
Mm,
this work is really about self-discovery, self-awareness, self-work, the work that we need to do. And so it's so easy to point out the things about others, but
mhm.
honestly, if we can stay curious about ourselves and what can we do to show up better, to me, that's the key.
Well said. I love that. Great way to end. Listeners, thank you for being here. As always, we'll get to the last three in the near future. Our fours, our fives, and our nines. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for this being here for this conversation, Dee, and we'll see you all in the next one.
See you later.